Hello and welcome to our CM Sites blog for April 2021. And today I'm talking to Larry Gurule of both CMPIC and CMviews about the digital thread. Welcome, Larry.
Good morning, Lisa. How are you?
Great, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
All right.
It's snowing here in Colorado, so I woke up to about 8 inches of fresh snow this morning.
Well, better you than me. You're welcome to come here
when
to
we're done
Virginia.
here, I'll be out shoveling the snow. Yeah. So.
Oh boy. Well, you're welcome to head on over to Virginia when you're ready for some sunshine.
All right.
So today's discussion, we're going to be talking about the digital thread. But first, quick word about who we are. I'm with CMstat, and our company has been in business since the late 80s. We're providers of COTS configuration management and data deliverables management software solutions, other services as well. And our focus is to help our customers implement processes that are aligned with industry standards and best practices. We perform business evaluations, CM plan reviews, CM assessments, and specialized training for our products and for other purposes. My name is Lisa Fenwick, and I'm the VP of Product Development here in CMstat. I've been with the company since 1995, and during that time, I have been fortunate enough to have several different flavors of both CM and DM training. And most recently, I've begun teaching the CM Assessor course for CMPIC. Now, I'd like to turn this over to Larry Gurule to introduce himself and tell you about a few of the things that he has going on. So there you go, Larry.
Thank you, Lisa. Hi, everybody. I'm Larry Gurule. I am president of CMPIC, which is, a lot of you know, provides the best top-notch, CM training out there. And not only are we recognized for our stellar training, but we are also recognized for the certifications that we provide. So we have a set of top shelf instructors, with effective material aimed at providing students and their organizations with it, that enduring truth, trust, and traceability that CM can deliver. Another third of my life, I am president of CMviews, which assists clients with their digital maturity. Throughout their product's lifecycle or their enterprise's lifecycle. In addition, CMviews is the owner and provider of the platform called Orpheus, which is revolutionizing process lifecycle management and execution. And then the other third of my life, I give away to standards groups. I'm currently vice chair of the G33, who's responsible for the 649 suite of standards. I was the principal author and lead project sponsor for the update of the 649 standard from B to C. So it was primarily my vision that brought the new standard forward. And then I am also an acting and voting member on a whole bunch of other committees, the ISO 9000 committees, including 10007, a bunch of IEEEs, including 15288 and 828, ASME, their model-based framework. I'm also significant in the INCOSE, the International Council of Systems Engineers, their CM working group. They have a relationship with the G33, and I'm a liaison on that, as well as, all kinds of other committees. I work on NIST, fiber physical system security, cybersecurity, all kinds of stuff. So kind of busy, I guess.
I don't know how you do it all. I honestly don't. But I think that's fantastic that you're involved in all of those things. So before we start, we should define the digital thread. So Larry, I'm going to turn it over to you to just kind of set the stage for what our discussion is going to be centering around.
So in discussing the digital thread, we thought we would go to a group, the ASME group, that is currently working on defining frameworks for model-based X, whatever it is, model-based enterprise, model-based engineering, model-based design, model-based systems engineering, all those kinds of things. And the definition that we found there was that that the digital thread is linkages of data from authorized sources that interconnect a digital enterprise. And that's a pretty decent definition, because the linkages of data, we have to remember that these threads that we're talking about here are really the paths of those threads are the execution of our processes. And as tasks are performed, not only do we have information that's used in their execution, we have information that results from that execution. And that in and of itself represents these threads that we need to navigate with the integrity desired in order to get a desired outcome from our processes, and have the resulting product that we desire.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and it really boils down to traceability. Being able to trace back through the history, and being able to pull what the latest information is forward into our simulations and modeling and support data. And
yeah, it's amazing, because the digital threads, and you brought up models. We're introducing concepts now that really do provide us with the infrastructure required, to ascertain, do we have the integrity we need, at all these steps, so that we're not propagating risk. So.
Right. And you and I have also talked about the fact that it's not a thread, it's not even yarn, it's more of a fabric.
It is, yep. It's multiple threads running in multiple directions, across all of our technical processes, that hopefully we can define in a risk-appropriate way. Yep.
Right. All right. So let's move on to a couple of questions. There are so many topics that relate to this, and how do you implement it, and what is the benefit of it, and what are the considerations? So during our talk today, we're going to talk about just a few of these. And we're going to start really with talking about why CM professionals and managers should even care about digital thread. How does this apply to what configuration managers do, and why do companies need to be aware of this?
Yeah, and that's interesting. Why should CM professionals and their managers care? Well, it depends, how much they should care, really, because as we look at digital threads, again, what are we talking about? Integrity. What are we talking about? Availability. And those things, CM has a role in providing the capabilities that allow us to refer to things precisely, and then, judge their integrity. Do they have a pedigree? Is there a provenance that we've defined towards them? Those kinds of things. And again, if what we're looking at is authentication, security, resilience, all these different characteristics, then it's impossible to have a digital environment without robust CM in place and have any level of integrity associated with it. Right. Remember, the value of CM is that it delivers enduring truth, trust, and traceability. And that's exactly what we need foundationally, for our digital threads.
Right. And I always think of everything in terms of the 5 pillars. And you can't do digital thread without your identification being done correctly. You have to have a unique identifier and everything linked to that product, whatever the product is, product, process, service. You have to have unique identifiers to make it work.
That's exactly right. And again, there's a reason why we say that CM is applicable in the 5 functions and the 40 principles across the product's lifecycle, because, not only are we defining information at every phase in our product's lifecycle that we want to be able to refer to precisely and make sure we can find it and have a place to put it, and it has the integrity desired and we're managing change against it. But that doesn't just apply to one thing. That applies to everything across the board, including the digital thread itself, that path that we're on.
That traceability.
Yep, exactly.
And the other the other pillar that I think is probably the least understood in CM is the planning aspect. And that's getting even broader now, because the access that has to be in place for people to access the product data they need correctly with security in mind, and the technologies that are available, and hosting data in the cloud. And there are just so many things about that need to be thought about and planned for, that really does fall under CM to identify that planning and who's responsible for it, but also just making sure that all of those things are in place. And there's so many things I think about planning that people plan for change. They plan for their change management process. They might plan for some metrics, but that's the next probably least implemented that I see are good metrics, helpful metrics.
Right.
So back to the pillars again. And you can't achieve any of this without having all of those things accounted for, which is what I like about the standard now, and how that looks at things and how that lays it all out for you.
One of the interesting aspects of CM planning is that, CM has to be done appropriately. There is no one size fits all. Anybody who, tells you they have, the true north or whatever is everybody does CM a little bit different. It's the Goldilocks factor. I don't need too much of it. I don't need too little. I need that right amount. But one of the things we have to remember in this conversation specifically is, in order to get CM right, we need to understand the context and environment of the product to which we want to apply CM. And that's exactly what the digital thread gives us. This digital thread we're talking about here, gives us that context to discern, are we doing CM appropriately? Because across that process, which is the digital thread, tasks will occur, and making sure that exchange and interoperability occur, that risks are being propagated. Again, we have that resilience aspect that we desire here as well. Those kinds of things. So, knowing context, awesome. The digital thread gives us that. Now, how do we plan for it? Roles, responsibilities, authority, train people. How are we interacting with our suppliers? Are we putting the right measurements in place? Are we training people the way we need to? Are we assessing? Are we flowing down? Are we backing up? Right? What happens if an incident happens and you lose all your data? Will you be able to recover? All those kinds of things.
Right.
All need to be considered. Because what happens if we lose it all? And we're completely digital. How do we get back to where we are? We have to not only capture the process, but the knowledge that got us there as well, as part of CM, in order to make all this work moving forward.
Yeah, and there are a couple of things about that. The role of CM is just more important than ever in making sure that those things are in place. The more digital we get, the more complex our security issues get, the more critical it is to have a configuration manager who can plan and account for those things and make sure that they're all in place and that the data is protected, like you said. Right. The other point that you made that I really liked was that, applying appropriate CM to the phase of the life cycle, to the maturity of the product, to the environment that you're in. I often talk to people who are, at first they're a little cold, they're a little hesitant to dive into any of this. They're standing back on, all right, go ahead and tell me what you want to tell me, but I'm not on board yet. And I think that's because they're afraid of what the historical view of CM has been, that it's this monster that's going to eat all of your control over any of your data. So when I talk to people about, okay, we're going to put a process in place for capturing your data during design development, but it doesn't mean you're going to have to go through that whole change process and CCB for every change you make. it's
Yeah.
it's even more important to get all that information and that appropriate design of your process correct, because with this digital information, you don't want a bunch of data lying out there that you don't need, and you don't want a process that's slowing you down unnecessarily.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and to your point, there's been an evolution to CM. CM is not your grandpappy CM or your dad's CM or even your that
Even your mom
CM.
and dad see them. It's not.
Yeah, no, it's not that anymore.
Yeah.
It's not just acquire supplier. It's not just thrusting something on somebody else and saying you do this so that I can trust you. It's like, do we trust ourselves? What are our enterprises doing? Do we have the integrity in human resources and sales and marketing and finance and even facility services that we need in order to be as lean and effective as possible. It's not about efficiency; it's effectiveness. Are we doing the right things to get the job done? Get that desired outcome. The first time. We talked about metrics, and everybody talks about change-related metrics, but one of the big metrics I put in place these days is first pass yield.
Right.
Are we getting things done right the first time? And not 4 or 5 times, trying to get it right. Because all of that, again, as we move forward in this new digital world, especially with, the vulnerabilities that it represents, we got to be on our A game. And that requires planning, to your point. And you can't wing your way to consistency. And then along with planning, how do we do the things we need for identification? How do we manage change? How do we put the verification and audit in place to make sure we're not burning the toast along the way, as Deming said, propagating risk, right?
Right.
And then all of this has to be planned for, and then accounting for the status as tasks are performed. We need insight, especially in a digital environment, in digital threads and digital twins, those kinds of things, as tasks occur. We don't want latencies because speed and agility will be, key characteristics. And if you're having to wait for data, speed and agility goes out the window. So we need insight as tasks are performed, and made available to those who need it in a form they can consume. So.
And I think we have wandered through many different areas of product information and configuration and process and everything during this discussion. And I think it could be kind of overwhelming to some people. At this point, some people might just be, "Oh, I can't get my hands around all this." But I would like to bring it back down as well to reality. I mean, what you've been talking about can be reality, is reality for some folks, but there's also a path of maturity that you follow to get there. One of my recent customers termed it as CM utopia. And we were having discussions, and she's like, "Okay, well, that's CM utopia. What we can do today is this, and it's putting us on the path to get there." So these things that we need to do and all these things that we've been talking about are achievable through a path. And you can, you need guidance on what's the next step you take? What's the next thing I do? What's the big rocks in the stream, as we say, that we can start tackling to get us there. So I wouldn't want people to be discouraged and say we can't get, the digital thread is not for me because I'm still managing changes by paper.
Well, so here's the dilemma, though,
Mm-hmm.
is we're no longer anticipating the storm, right?
Mm-hmm.
The cyclone isn't on the horizon. We're Dorothy in the middle of that cyclone, heading up, because the world is transforming around us. Whether we're ready for the digital threat or not, it's happening to us. And the problem is none of us know exactly what when we open that door into Oz, what Oz is going to look like, your unicorn land or, CM Utopia.
Yeah.
And so, we got to do the best we can right now. And it starts really, where you said, it starts with effective planning. How can we, plan, prepare, and proceed, for all of this? Because, there is a disruption going on, and it's going to make or break our organizations. Those who are able to adapt are going to succeed. Those who are going to struggle are going to have difficulties succeeding. And we saw that just in the last year. Look at how many businesses that were able to transform, made it through the last year, and those that couldn't, have kind of gone by the wayside. So
we've all got to be pretty flexible these days. And that really leads us into our next question. How do you see the role of CM evolving from our grandpappy CM, as you say, to supporting the digital thread?
Well, I see it as something, who better suited in an organization to orchestrate, truth, trust, and traceability than the CM department. So I see CM's role, evolving from administrative, doing CM, to orchestrating CM.
Yes, I agree.
Doing the planning, coming up with a plan and procedures, making sure that the training is there. But even prior to that, making sure that our leadership understand what CM is, and that we get effective policies in regards to configuration management and our digital environments in place, because we need an expression of management's expectation in order to have the resources required, to accomplish what we need.
Yes.
And if we can't convince our leadership of the value of CM and its role, in this digital future, then we're already failing.
Right.
And so we all have to become more evangelistic about CM and the value that it provides. We need to understand its capabilities more thoroughly and how they relate to us. And we need to be able to make a business case with impact analysis, to present to our leaders, to get them to commit the resources required, to make the changes we need, to address this very dynamic future that is facing us all.
Yes, I agree 100%. And I see one of the key factors here is management empowering CM to be that conductor of the orchestra. They really need to get behind CM and give them the power to do what needs to be done.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Because sneaky CM is great, but we got to be a little bit more overt. We don't want haystack repositories, just because collaboration is required. We want to be able to collaborate in a way that we can preserve the integrity we desired as well. We don't want things changing in unauthorized or haphazard ways, those kinds of things. So that requires some level of discipline, and it's, that discipline is CM.
Right. And the standards, especially having been involved in 649C, I heard those discussions about what changes were being made to the standard and why we were putting certain principles in place. And it certainly has changed the focus to more process, to include process and software and appropriate CM and the planning and management and metrics gathering and all that's going to support this move to the digital thread. So I do see big changes in the standards I'm familiar with, getting us set up for that success.
Yeah, and that's a large part. My role in these other standards committees beyond the G33 is, first of all, evangelizing for CM, but then also getting normative references in those standards, to the 649 standard, which we've been extremely successful at, because people recognize that when you talk about continuous assurance, or you talk about system assurance, or you talk about technical assurance, anything that has assurance on it, that assurance is impossible without having appropriately defined CM in place. There's just no well to draw that information from without CM in place. And so if we're ignoring CM, we're literally cutting our own throats as far as our digital futures go.
Absolutely. Well, I think that is about the limit of our time today. Like I mentioned, there are so many areas that we just touched on that have more detail in there. And we're going to continue the conversation, and I hope we have some of your input as well going forward, Larry. I would like to thank you for joining me today for this. Really appreciate you taking the time out to support this with us. And I always enjoy our conversations, learn so much from your experience, your insight. What is next on the horizon for you?
Well, I am continuing on with evangelizing CM and all those various standard groups. We got some big things coming out, revisions of major documents that are going to highlight CM in new ways, the broadness of enterprise CM in new ways, which I'm excited about. And then we're also, personally, I'm getting ready to launch my tool Orpheus here pretty quick for process lifecycle management. It looks like we got some, we're entering late stage beta on it, so we're excited about that as well.
That sounds great. I'm anxious to see that. All right. So thank you again, Larry, and thank you everyone for joining us. If you'd like to follow this discussion on digital thread and other topics, you can subscribe to our blog at CMstat.com. And if you have further questions and want to contact either Larry or myself, we're happy to hear from you. And our contact information is on the screen here. Thank you again for tuning in.